So welcome to today's webinar. We are going to be discussing the Provider Services Portal. This is a new practitioner enrollment tool that is available to you. And we're going to go through how to get into the portal, what some of the things that you can do in the portal. So let's start with what are we going to go over? Well, we're going to give you some general information about the portal, where to find other additional information about it. So we have a Provider Services Portal homepage on emedney.org, and we'll go over that. I'll show you some of the information that's available out there. What you're going to do in order to get into the portal is you're going to have to create an NYGov ID, and we're going to go over some of the steps on how to do that. We're going to go over a quick overview of the portal. We're not going to go through each of the steps, but we'll give you a general overview of the Provider Services Portal and what you'll have available on there when you're filling out an application for Medicaid. So we'll show you how to create and track your applications. We'll give you a description of the different milestones. So there's going to be 4 different milestones that you will complete. And in each of those milestones, there are different steps that you'll complete. Then we'll talk about submitting the application. That's going to be a very important step. We're going to talk about that, how to upload documents and what types and forms of documents you can upload, and how to check your application status. You'll be able to check your application status. You'll be able to see the change in status on the application through the portal as well, something you weren't able to do necessarily previously when you're sending in a paper application. So now you'll be able to see if the status of the application has changed. And then we'll finish up with some reminders to go over again and some reference and contact information at the end. So the New York State Medicaid Provider Services Portal is new, and it is for people that are doing new enrollment of practitioners. So right now, the portal is available for individual practitioners. If you are referring to a business, an organization, a facility, that won't be done at this time. It may be in the future. Keep an eye out for changes of the portal. But for right now, we are allowing enrollment of individual practitioners. So on your screen, you will see a list of those practitioners that are currently able to use the portal to enroll in New York State Medicaid. At this time also, this is for new enrollments. So if you are doing maintenance, if you are already enrolled in Medicaid and you're doing maintenance of your provider file, that will not occur on the portal at this time, and you'll continue to do the paper process for that. As I mentioned, you will need to establish an NYGov ID business account. Now, you may currently have an NYGov ID for your own personal use, maybe at the DMV or thereabouts, but we are requiring you to establish an NYGov business account in order to get access to the portal. Also, all practitioners, credentialers, and staff must have their own NYGov ID. And this will become pertinent to you why you need to do that when we get towards the end of the application. The practitioner will have to electronically sign from their account. And we'll talk about that, and I'll show you what will happen. Part of getting an NYGov is the security of that account. So you will have to establish multi-factor authentication and complete a process of identity proofing. And I'll show you an example of that and talk about that as well. Once you start your application in the portal, it must be completed within 45 calendar days. That was just recently updated, and it is now 45 calendar days to complete that application. If it is not submitted within those 45 days, the application will be deleted in the portal and you will have to start the process again. So make sure that you have everything ready to go and you can complete it within that 45 days. So as I mentioned, the application itself is divided into 4 different milestones, with each milestone having different steps with it. And you'll complete each of those steps as you go through. Credentialers and staff. As I mentioned, you can have your own NYGov account. You can start and fill out the application, but the individual practitioner must e-sign and submit the completed application. So that's why we mentioned that all practitioners, credentialers, and staff would have to have an NYGov account if you're going to be touching an application. So where can you find information? We're going to start with the medney.org website. You should be familiar with this website. It's the public website out there. The first place is under the Provider Enrollment tab. So if you click on the Provider Enrollment tab at the top, that will bring you to the enrollment process. We've changed this and updated it to have you select whether you're doing a new enrollment or if you're currently enrolled or previously enrolled, and you can get to the other maintenance items through there. New enrollment, you will select that and determine what type of practitioner you are or what type of business or whatever. When you select practitioner, it will tell you all the individual practitioners that are able to enroll, and it will push you into the portal information. So you would click here to continue. You can also get to the portal information using the links on the right-hand side of the website. The 4th one down is the New York State Medicaid Provider Services portal link. Clicking on that is an alternate way to get to the PSP homepage. So you can get to it by going through either of those 2 directions. The PSP homepage is currently updated with as much information as we have. You'll notice on the right-hand side, there is a user guide, a complete user guide on using the PSP portal, walking you through all the different steps. Many of the questions you may have and the questions that we've received on previous webinars, we have put together an FAQ, or frequently asked questions document. So you may have a question about something related to this, or after today's webinar, you may have a question. You can always look at the FAQs to see if your question has been answered in writing. Underneath that, we also have put together quick reference guides. So these are smaller segments of each of the milestones. You'll notice also the very first one, and that's a very important one. The first one says documents for new submissions. So that reference guide is probably your first step. You'll want to take a look at that to see what documents you may need to have ahead of time to help you get those ready so it's much easier to complete your application. You can work on collecting those documents, having them scanned so you have an electronic version of it, and then you're ready to go when you need to fill out the application. Underneath that are some additional helpful links. Part of those is the training session. So we have a link to these slides available on the PSP Provider Services portal. As I mentioned, we are recording, so we may be posting this as a video as well. Now on the left side is a step-by-step guide on what you need to do to complete an application. First step is obtaining access to the portal, and this walks you through the process of establishing an NYGov ID and what you need to do to get into the portal. Step 2 is starting your enrollment application and what you need to take note of when you're doing your application in the portal. Step 3 is you're completing the application, what happens after that, some of the different statuses you may see. Step 4 is a review of the enrollment application after its determination. So you can certainly read through those different steps to see what you'll be experiencing inside the portal once you get there. We're going to start with how to get into the portal by establishing your NY.gov ID. So on step 1 at the bottom, there was a link to click here to begin, and this will bring you to this login screen. Now, obviously, you don't yet have a login. You will once you establish it. So we're going to first start with creating an account. When you go into create an account, like I mentioned, everyone must establish a business account. So your practitioner itself, your credentialers and staff who are maybe touching the application and helping with establishing the application, everyone will have to have their own business account. So you're going to click on business and it will start the process. Now you're going to select New York State Department of Health. That is the agency that you're going to be going through. So you're going to select New York State Department of Health to get into their tool of enrollment. You're also going to enter in information about yourself. So your name and email address, and you will create a username. You'll click on Create Account. Now, if you notice just under that, it says Step 1 of 3. There are 2 other additional steps that you will go through in order to create your password. We're not going to show you those here, but once you do all 3 of those steps, you will be taken to the NY.gov homepage. From this, you're going to leave this page and you're going to go back to emedney.org and go back to that NY.gov ID. Now you have established a username and password. So you're going to enter in your username and password and click Sign In. I mentioned earlier that you will have to establish a multi-factor authentication and identity proofing as part of this process. Now, once you do that, you won't have to do it again. This is a one-time thing in the account setup. So after you click Sign In, the system will force you to create a multi-factor authentication. We would recommend that you maybe set up more than one of these, especially if one is not available for you at that time. You have possible options to switch to a different authentication. So the MFA options available to you include Okta Verify and Google Authenticator. Those would be apps that you would download onto your smartphone. You also can establish SMS or text option. So the system can text you a code. And you can set up a voice call. So the voice call would call you at a local number and it would tell you a code and you would enter in that. Many of these steps are familiar to you possibly with other ways that you're getting into secure websites. So you may already have some of these available to you. After you set those up, you will have to do your identity proofing. Now, you will need access to your U.S. passport, a passport card, a driver's license, or a state-issued non-driver ID. So you don't have to have all of those. If you have your driver's license with you in your wallet, then you can use that as your identity proofing. You don't have to go and find your passport. But those are different forms of identification that you can use for this. You're going to click Continue and start the process. So you're going to click on Get Started, and it's going to have you take a picture of your ID through your smartphone and upload it to the site. They are checking to make sure you are who you are when you're creating this NY.gov ID. As I mentioned, this is a one-time thing. You don't have to do this every time. So once you've completed those steps, you've then created your NY.gov ID. You will then go log in, again, username and password, and now you will sign in and get into the enrollment portal. It will trigger you to now use that multi-factor authentication that you have created. So in this instance, we're showing the option of SMS text. You must remember that if it says send a code, you need to force it to send you a code. It won't do it automatically. So make sure you click on send code. You'll get your code on your cell phone, on your smartphone, enter that code in and verify it, and now you'll be into the portal. So you'll do those steps each time you log into the portal, your username, password, and your MFA, your multi-factor authentication, and then you'll get into the enrollment portal. In the enrollment portal, you'll have a couple options. You'll be able to start a new enrollment, and you will be able to track your application. So we're going to come back to track an application, and we're going to start with a new enrollment. As I mentioned, currently, the process is available for individuals. So you should only see for now a single option of individual, and you will select that option. You will have some other additional instructions that will appear. Make sure you have these things ready for you. As you can see, it's reminding you to have your documents handy and basic information about the provider. So you'll want to gather that information. Same information you would need on a paper application, you may need that information also on the electronic format. Also at the bottom, it's reminding you again, you have 45 calendar days. You'll see that again as you proceed through the application. So we're going to go ahead and click on Proceed and continue on. When you start the application, there is some basic information that you'll start with before you'll see the milestones. The default for your application type or applicant type is fee-for-service now. That is your default. You can change that, and you'll notice that the other option is ordering, prescribing, referring, and attending. That's the OPRA option. If you are going to be an individual or provider that will not bill Medicaid, maybe you're enrolling so that you can work at a facility and the facility will do all the billing, then you might be enrolling as an OPRA provider. If you select OPRA as the option instead of fee-for-service, you will be reminded again that you will not be able to submit a claim to Medicaid. You won't be fee-for-service. You will only be able to order, prescribe, refer, or attend service, and you would be listed, say, for example, on a facility claim. If you choose to be able to bill Medicaid as a provider, you'll keep it as fee-for-service, and the next option you'll be asked is, are you part of a group or do you also have a private practice? So you'll need to choose the appropriate answer to that question. No, I am only in a group and I don't have a private practice. It's not applicable. I'm not a part of a group. Or yes, I'm part of a group and I also have a private practice. So you might be billing Medicaid directly without the group also. Then you're going to fill out your demographic information on the provider, first name and last name, provider's NPI number, date of birth, and Social Security number. Again, that's why we have the security that we do for the website, because you're dealing with protected information about this provider. And then you're going to also list an email address. Now, this is an email that notices may be sent to. So make sure you put in an email address correctly and make sure it's one that is maintained and monitored, because you may be getting notices to that email address. You're then going to generate the application, and that's going to start the process and create the start of the application. But when you do that, it will assign an application ID number. You'll want to make note of this application ID number. You're going to need that in tracking your application. Now, if you are a credentialer and you're doing this for multiple different providers, you're going to want to keep track of this information. So make sure you keep a copy of that application ID number. Maybe create yourself a database of your providers and their application IDs. The other information, again, it tells you this is an individual, it's in process, and who it's for. Then you're going to go to the application, but you're also going to receive an email with a letter, and that information will also be available to you in that email. So you can keep those copies of emails, and that is another way of keeping a database or keeping track of which application ID number goes with which provider. Again, it is also reminding you that now that you've started the process, you have 45 calendar days to complete your application and get it submitted. Once you get into and you've created that demographic information and you've proceeded with it, you will now see your milestones that you will need to complete. At the top is a reminder of the information that you've given us, your application ID, that this is for an individual, the name of the person, but you'll also notice it gives you a start date and an end date. So again, it is taking into account the 45 days that you have. Over on the right-hand side, you have an options link, a drop-down menu, and that's where you can cancel the application if you no longer need to submit it. You can also print the application if you needed to and keep copies of it for yourself. On the left side, you're going to notice a small little link that says enrollment requirements. Now, this may give you a list of documents or information that may be optional or required as part of your application. So you may want to review that to see what documents are going to be needed as part of your application. On the right-hand side again, it is reminding you 45 days remaining. Also, it tells you how much of the application you've completed. So this will change as you go through and complete the different steps. So as I mentioned, you're going to have milestones that you're going to need to complete. And you're going to notice that the first milestone has an unlocked icon, and the other ones are currently locked. You will need to complete milestone 1 in order to get to the others. Next to the milestones, there is an information ID or an information icon, and by clicking on each of those, it will tell you the steps that are inside each of those milestones. In the center part, it will give you a status of each of those milestones. And also on the right-hand side, oh, sorry, I jumped ahead. Just as a reminder, if you're working on an application and you get called away, or if it sits idle for too long, the session will time you out. So you may receive this notice. You'll need to make sure that you stay active in it. Otherwise, it will log you out where you are. On the right-hand side, you'll notice there is a down arrow, and that is to open each one of those sections so you can go through the different milestones. So by clicking on that first arrow, now we've opened up milestone number 1, and you can see the different steps that you will need to complete. So you'll need to give us basic information, federal tax information, and the specialties and license information of that provider. You must complete this step in order to proceed to the other milestones. So this is information that is required in order to get to the others. These are not optional. Next milestone, milestone number 2, once you get through that first one, you've now opened the others. The next step is education and training, and some of that information may be optional. You'll need to go through each of those steps. You're going to add in payment details and locations that or addresses where the person may be doing service. Step 3, or milestone 3, I'm jumping ahead again, sorry. Part of milestone 2 is the payment details, and we do want to talk about this. This is very important. Your EFT agreement, your direct deposit, you're going to fill out the information, the banking information for that provider. Now, it is up to you and that provider on what information you're going to give us. You can give us the individual's banking information because remember, if they were to submit a claim directly to us without a group NPI on it, we're going to pay that provider directly. So they may want that payment to go to their bank information. If you give us the group's bank information, that payment would go to the group. So you need to determine what banking information you're going to give us. You're going to fill out that step on here. Now, when you get to the bottom of that step, there is a download link on the right-hand side here. The download link will open up a form for the EFT. We want to let you know that this is the form for electronic funds transfer that is specific to the website. And this is the form you're going to need to submit, not the form that is on emedney.org. As you can see, the form will be pre-filled out based on the information you've given us so far. You're going to print this form out. You're going to have the authorized signature on the bottom added, and then you're going to upload the form back to the website again. So again, you're going to need to use this form from the website. The next milestone is additional information, associate, billing provider, or other associations, your ETIN information, and any controlling interest or ownership details, very similar to a paper application that you may be used to. So you're going to add much of that same information here on the website. Step 4 is completing your application. So you have an enrollment checklist, any documents that you need to upload, and then you're going to submit the application. So a credentialer could complete most of these steps, but again, the individual provider will need to complete step number 12. So step number 12, completing and submitting that application, you're going to go into step number 12, you're going to go down to the bottom of that, and you're going to notice there's a name that's pre-filled out. Now you'll notice on here, the name is saying John Doe, but the practitioner that you're filling this out for is Carl R. So those do not match. If you are the credentialer and you are submitting this, it's going to go under your name because it's under your account. So this is why we said you must have the individual practitioner sign up for their own NYGov account, and they will need to go in and actually e-sign here and submit the application. So right now, this application would be rejected back to you, and if you want to eliminate that rejection, you need to make sure that the individual practitioner is submitting the application. So again, here is an example. Carl R. now has signed in. His name matches the application name. It is good. He now can check off the box at the bottom and then click Next to proceed. When that provider clicks Next, they will then be able to select other credentialer access to the application. So in the future, if there's problems with the application, they will be able to determine what credentialers or people have touched this application, have the ability to assist with the application. So they'll be able to move that credentialer's information over on the left to the right-hand side. Now this may populate with those accounts that have previously touched the application and can continue to do so based on this provider's permissions. This will come at the end of the application going forward for any additional information that may be needed. So again, select those credentialers that will have attestation access, slide them over to the right-hand side. Make sure you click on the box at the bottom that you are signing this application, and then submit the application. And that application would then be completed. Now, one step that we did skip was step number 8. That was an example of the ETIN step. We're all familiar with the ETIN. And this would be similar to putting in any supporting documentations. We want to mention that the ETIN form can be uploaded to the website. It doesn't have to be submitted electronically, or it doesn't have to be submitted on paper when you're creating your application on here. Other ETIN applications you are getting through the mail will still need to be continued that direction and that way for this time. But if you're creating a new application for a provider, you'll be able to add that ETIN application or ETIN certification statement to the website. So you're going to click on Add, and this would be the same process when you're adding other documents. So you're going to select the document type, and in this case, in this step, step number 8, you're doing an ETIN document. So you'll select ETIN. Then you're going to select the document name, ETIN certification for new enrollments, and it gives you the form number. Now this form, you can use the form from the emedney.org website. You're going to choose that form from your electronic scanned documents on your computer. So you're going to choose that, upload it, and as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the different formats. So you will be able to submit these different file formats to the website. Your GIFs, your JPEGs, HTMLs, your PDF. Most of your documents, you might save them as PDFs or docs, Word documents. So those are the different file formats that you will be able to upload to the application. Then you're going to choose Upload Document, and it will add that document to the website. So now you'll see that you've completed that document addition to the website. So that is the similar process you would follow when you're adding any other documents to the website. Now, once you've submitted the application, it will tell you your application number again, and it will say that it's been successfully submitted for state review. So now the application is on its way to the Bureau of Provider Enrollment, and you may want to track your application. So we're going to come back to the portal, and we're going to click on Track Your Application. If you are the credentialer or the person that initiated and started the application, you may have the application ID in your list. So you may be a credentialer that has many different application IDs because you're creating applications on behalf of the providers. You'll be able to track enrollment status. You'll be able to return to an application that you started, and the provider will use this process to e-sign and submit their application. So there's a couple different options here. Option number 1 is entering the application ID at the top. So if the provider, for example, did not create their application, but they're going in to sign their application, they're going to use the track application option. And you're going to need to give them the application ID. They're going to enter that application ID in at the top and click Next to have the system search for that application. Now, we don't want a mistake to happen. We don't want somebody to make a typo and pull up somebody else's application. So there's additional information that will be required to make sure we pull up the correct application. you will need to enter in the social security number of that provider, the date of birth, and the zip code that was given on the application. That's another way of making sure that we're pulling up the correct one, the correct application, in case somebody gave the wrong application ID. So again, this is a security mechanism to make sure we're getting the right application. You enter that information, click submit, and it will bring that provider back to the application, and they'll be able to e-sign. Now, option number 2, as I mentioned, if you're the credentialer or the person that started the application, or if you're the individual practitioner that you're doing your own application, then you may see your application here in the list. And that is a link that you'll be able to click on. So you click on that link and it will bring you back to the application. Now here's an example of an application that's in process, so it hasn't been submitted yet. Here's an application that's been submitted, but it's still working its way through the process. It's just been submitted, hasn't changed the status yet of a review. Here's an application where additional information is required. So now the state has reviewed the application and they sent it back to you that they need more information on something. If you see this status, don't click on the application ID at the beginning. What you're going to do is you're going to start with that process at the top. So go back to option number 1 and actually enter in the application ID. We found that this works better in finding the note that they have supplied to you. So enter in the application ID and click next, and it will bring you into the application. Again, you'll have to enter in that information on option number 1 again. Click submit, and it will bring you back to the application. Now, on the right-hand side, in the middle there, you're going to notice there is a step remark. So that remark will tell you what the state needs additional information on. So you're going to click on that and it will open up information. So here, they're notifying you that you did not do the correct EFT agreement, or you didn't upload that EFT agreement. So they're asking you to go ahead and do that. So you'll go into that step and you'll complete that process again. Okay, so you need to complete this within, again, 45 days and get that application back to them. So this is their way of getting back to you. You may have received an email to notify you that there is some additional information required. So you would go back into the portal to go and look for that information. So again, that's why we say that email that you give us at the beginning is important, because that's where you're going to be notified that more information might be required. Now, also, if you have mistakenly submitted the application and you are not the individual that's listed in the application and you mistakenly submitted the application, that is probably one of the first things they're going to check to make sure that the names match. So they would reject your application and send it back to you if you were the credentialer and you tried signing the application and your name doesn't match the provider that is you are enrolling. Okay, so you again would be notified to have the provider go in and sign and submit the application directly. Now, you will be notified, or the application status will change when it is in final review. So that's made it through all the initial review process. They've got all the information they need, and now the application is in the final step and in the final review process. So you will see that as it changes throughout the process. All right, so we do want to remind you that this is currently available for practitioners. So again, we're referring to individual providers. You must establish an NYGov ID business account in order to access the portal. All credentialers and staff, if you're going to be touching an application, must have their own account. And remember that the practitioner must have their own account in order to sign the application. So they will need to do this in order to get in and sign the application. Multi-factor authentication and identity proofing will be done during that process of setting up the NY.gov ID. Again, that is a one-time thing. You'll set up your MFA and do the identity proofing. Once that's completed, you'll just use that MFA to get into the account after you log in. Once you start your application, as a reminder, you've got 45 days to complete it. If you don't submit it after that 45 days, or within that for 45 days, I should say, the application will be deleted and you would have to start the process over again. So again, it's helpful to make sure you have all the information available to you and you can just go ahead and continue through and complete the application. Additional information that is requested by the state should also be completed within 45 days. So don't sit on it too long and wait for that to be done. As I mentioned, credentialers and staff, you may work in here, you may get applications started and filled out, that's fine. But again, the practitioner will have to e-sign the application itself once you've completed it. So the practitioner will need to create their own account. Just like if you were submitting a paper claim, that practitioner should, or not the paper claim, but the paper application, that practitioner must be signing that as well, because that is their enrollment into the Medicaid system. So same thing here, the practitioner must e-sign and submit. We've had several that have been rejected back because the credentialer submitted it and didn't have the practitioner go in and e-sign it. Save yourself that headache and save yourself that trouble by just making sure the practitioner creates their own account and e-signs it. So just some additional information for you and reference information. Make sure you review the Provider Services Portal homepage. A lot of information is available to you. Step-by-step guides are available that will go through the different screens more, and it will tell you what is needed on those screens. We didn't go through those directly, the individual steps, but these user guides will walk you through how to do that. Also, you may have a question about the portal, and it may be answered in writing through the FAQs. So take a look at the FAQs. Take a look at that quick reference guide on what documents are needed for a new submission. Prepare those ahead of time to save yourself some steps, and that way you can continue through the process quickly. Also, we have a reference guide on going through the different NY.gov account process, so you can take a look at that. I do want to mention any issues or problems with NY.gov, that is handled by the state. That is not handled by eMedNy. So that is a separate account that is not done through eMedNy. The NY.gov is a New York State account, and you will have to go to them if you have any problems with your NY.gov account. We do also have the quick reference guides for each of the milestones, and those will go through the different steps under those milestones and help you with what information is needed on those. So you may want to look through those. And as I mentioned, we do have a link to this presentation on that website, and we will be posting a video of this presentation, so you can take a look at that at a later date. So again, if you have any issue with the NY.gov ID, you're going to contact this number that's on your screen, 844-891-1786. You can also email them at fixit, F-I-X-I-T, at its.ny.gov. .gov. As you can see, that is not going to eMedNY. So if, again, there is any issue with your NY.gov ID, you're not going to call the regular call center number. You're going to contact the state at this phone number or email address. If you have questions about enrollment and what is needed, what's going on with an enrollment, you can contact the Bureau of Provider Enrollment. And their email address is that, provider enrollment, those two words put together, provider enrollment at health.ny.gov. If you need assistance with eMedNY website or information about provider enrollment, you can find that on the eMedNY website. Also, you can contact the eMedNY call center if you need help with the portal that you're working through. Again, we cannot assist with the NY.gov ID itself, but we are able to assist you with the provider services portal. So you can contact the eMedNY call center if you have a question about information that you're putting in.